Hello and welcome to another great session that is a part of Learning Impact 2021. My name is Karen Daughtery. I am the K-12 Program Manager here with IMS Global, and I will be your host today, keeping an eye on the chat. Feel free to ask those questions there in the chat as our speakers are discussing this wonderful topic with us. We are thrilled to have Tim Beekman and the team from Chicago Public Schools joining us today to share the great work that they have done and the project that actually won them the Platinum Award for Learning Impact Awards this year. We're excited that you're here and looking forward to the conversation. With that, Helena, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Karen. I'm going to start because we're going to kind of do an order here, but thanks everybody for joining. Chicago is a fantastic project with a ton of innovation. It was for us a design and build project, so that's kind of exciting. I am the president and co-founder of Safari Montage, also the chairman of the IMS board as well, and I'm excited to do this presentation today. Gio?
My name is Giovanni Benincasa. I'm the UX UI manager for Chicago Public Schools Department of Curriculum Instruction and Digital Learning.
Hi, everyone. My name is Helena Swanson-Nystrom. I'm the executive director of the Department of Curriculum Instruction and Digital Learning, and I'm going to get us started before I hand it back to Tim and Giovanni. I want to talk a little bit about how we actually built Skyline, which is Chicago Public Schools' first ever digital pre-K-12 standards aligned and culturally responsive curriculum. It was built under the umbrella of the Curriculum Equity Initiative. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we actually built. So this all started a few years ago when we did a survey of over 500 teachers across the district, asking them, do you currently have curriculum from your school? And from that survey, we found that about 50% of teachers responded, no, we currently do not have curricular resources that our school provides. So from that information, it was clear that we had to develop some universal resources for our teachers, for all of our schools. And in order to do so, we started having conversations with districts, state boards of ed across the country to figure out if they already have a model for developing high quality, culturally responsive curriculum, how do they do it? There's no reason for Chicago to reinvent the wheel if there's already a really great model out there. So in those conversations, we realized that there are sort of two traditional models out there. The first, there are districts out there who, as you can imagine, just purchase off the shelf or out of the box. The nice thing about that is if 50% of your teachers don't have curricular resources, you buy it, you give it to them, and we can move forward right away. It's very time effective. But we were finding that those national products often don't really meet the needs of Chicago students. They often don't have English learner supports, they don't have diverse learner supports, and the content itself just really isn't culturally responsive. So we didn't want to go in that direction. The other model that we were finding is there are some districts out there who build from scratch, which is wonderful. As you can imagine, if that's managed really well, you really are developing a custom curriculum for your particular student body. However, in those conversations, we were finding that it was taking districts upwards of 5 to 10 years just to build in 1 or 2 content areas, which again, if 50% of your teachers don't have curricular resources, 5 to 10 years is just a really long time to wait. So instead of going in either of those directions, we actually tried to pull together lessons learned, strengths from each of those models, and we developed a hybrid model. And the hybrid model is that we put out requests for proposals, and we ended up purchasing base licensed digital curriculum from national publishers, and then entered into agreements with those publishers where they agreed to customize a portion of that content to meet our needs. So about 25%, give or take, based on the contract. Those customizations were driven by feedback from our district level teams and then hundreds of teacher reviewers. We had over 300 teachers involved in this process. The other thing that they agreed to do, which was actually a pretty big deal, was disengage their content. The publishers agreed to disengage their content from their proprietary platforms and centralize all of the curriculum within a central CPS technical ecosystem to improve the user experience for our teachers, our students, our families, and also allow the district to revise, iterate, and improve the content over time. Again, because it's centralized, we then have access to those resources and can make changes as necessary. So that's the hybrid model. After we entered into agreements with publishers, we then entered into an agreement with Ed Reports. It was really important, especially with 300 teachers being involved in the development of Skyline courses, that we be very clear with our external partners about what CPS's definition of high quality curriculum is. So in partnership with Ed Reports, we developed custom rubrics, which is all centralized. All of those materials are centralized with the Skyline Curriculum Development Guidebook. And that really just lays out the district's definition of what we're looking for in each of these courses. The content areas on the left are those that we actually just released this summer. So they're being used in classrooms right now. We have English language arts, math, science, social science, and 2 world languages, Spanish and French. And then the content areas on the right are those that were in early conversations to develop as sort of a phase 2, Spanish language arts, PE, health, computer science. Even this list is not exhaustive. We've had conversations with people who would love to see an Arabic world language curriculum, a Mandarin world language curriculum, CTE. So again, this is just sort of phase 2, but the sky really is the limit. And then I quickly just want to run through what we mean when we say that Skyline is a curriculum. We'll often talk to external partners, sometimes ed tech tool providers or vendors, and the definition of curriculum varies widely. When we say that Skyline is a curriculum, we mean that these are fully articulated courses. We really want this to be a one-stop shop for our teachers who need resources, but it's certainly not a scripted curriculum, and we built it on platforms that allow for flexibility for teachers to make Skyline their own. So Skyline includes scopes and sequences, course instructional routines, unit plans, lesson level teacher facilitation guides. So again, all of that teacher facing content, as well as lesson level student facing materials, formative assessments, summative assessments, interim assessments, and Giovanni will walk through some examples of these. So guys can actually see what this looks like. And then here are just some examples of the customization that we worked on with our teacher reviewers and with our vendor partners. Again, with the hybrid model, about 25% of the curriculum was customized. And this list here are really the things that we prioritized. So our vendor partners built mini lessons for students who needed an opportunity to be challenged, an opportunity to review, or English language supports. They built in supports for diverse learners and English learners at the lesson level. Aligned all of the content to the WIDA standards, the English language development standards, aligned to the SEL standards, built in a lot of SEL opportunities, and then built in a lot of Chicago-based learning examples. Again, we want to make sure that what our students are experiencing at home or in their backyards or in the communities is reflected in what they're learning about in the classroom. So that's how we developed Skyline. I did mention with the hybrid model that one of the things we're most excited about is that all of the content is centralized. So Tim Beekman is going to talk about the technical ecosystem and what that actually looks like.
Yeah, so in our ecosystem here, it's very interesting because this was not a typical, you turn the system on and bring all the providers and you're done. This was design and build, not just design and build from the technical side, but from the curriculum side, as Helena was talking about, vendors who had to break up their content into individual items and facilitate them within a learning platform that CPS wanted. So everyone can imagine the amount of work that everyone had to do in a short period of time. And COVID speeded that time up basically by 6 to 8 months to get the curriculum up as well. So in our ecosystem, we have Rapid ID as the communicator with the Follett and giving us the rosters and that, and giving us the rosters across all the vendors. All the vendors are thin CC or thick CC in bringing their content in. Those content providers all had to work across Illuminate, across interface with Safari, facilitate those into Google Classroom, and the technology all had to work together that we could roster Google Classroom for teachers and students and facilitate all this environment across all the providers. That's a ton of customization and couldn't have been done without IMS standards. We would have been absolutely in craziness, but the IMS standards helped us pull it together. School City built some assessment pieces where we can even facilitate recording inside across vendors. All the data we will get out of this will be, we can get data on every object and every time on task, all the data you want. you can get to facilitate what's going on by the network, by the school, by the teacher, by the district, which is very important. So the ecosystem here is all built on standards. CASE is the academic standard for the content. LTI, one roster, it's all in here. This is a great example of vendors coming in across the platform, building to IMS standards and having a continuity of an output that works for everybody. Helena, that's it for me on this slide. Gio, you're up.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Helena. As Helena had mentioned, this hybrid model really affords us a lot of opportunities. What you're looking at here is something from a student's perspective. You would call this student view. And you have the main content that is in the center in the iframe. Along your right-hand side of your screen, you can see that there's guidance, both guidance that is general to the playlist, and then there'll be additional guidance that is both teacher and student facing. Teacher facing is not visible to students for each of those learning objects that you see at the bottom. So the bottom carousel, you can scroll through. You can actually see in one of the thumbnails that there's a Google Doc. There's an activity within this lesson playlist to be completed. Lessons learned from remote learning is getting content shared to students and then having the student be able to complete that and share it back to the teacher is more complicated than you think. I've seen things from taking pictures of textbooks all the way on through emailing attachments as being things that people had to do. It really illustrated for us what Tim was referring to in the technical ecosystem, how we're trying to lower that administrative burden, not just for teachers, but for learners as well. So when the teacher shares this lesson, this 8th grade ELA lesson with their students, every student gets their own editable copy of that lesson, of that activity, and then they're able to return that work for feedback. Why is this so exciting? Why am I geeking out so much about something like this? Having been in the classroom for 15 years, those minutes are precious. And anything that we can do to lower the friction between the teacher's ability to share and between the student's ability to complete and share back and get good feedback about their progress and learning, that is game changing because those minutes are precious, and the more we can reduce the friction, the better. This is a more presentational style for some content. If we go to the next, we can see something here from our science content. This is grade 4 science content. In many schools, your elementary school teachers who also teach science and social science may not feel real expert in those areas because for many years, the trend had been towards literacy and numeracy at the lower levels. This really gives a teacher who maybe doesn't feel like an expert with their science content or instruction, some game-changing moves to make that absolutely support that mission of early literacy and early numeracy. Again, you can see that we can share this content as from Helena's opening when she talked about we take that content from the vendor's platform. We're able to deliver it here without the learner having to go to multiple places. We know from educational research when it comes to cognitive load for students, if what they're learning is new and how they're learning it is new, the how counts against the what. So by diminishing the amount of places that we send them out digitally to learn, the less that novelty is counting against retention. So here they're able to be with this strong amplified content but without having to leave the CPS technical ecosystem. That's game changing. Let's go to the next slide and I can show you something that I certainly would have appreciated as a learner. What we see here is an interactive that's being delivered from that Amplify platform. So as Tim suggested, those IMS global standards that allow for LTI delivery of this content is transformative. So in traditional groupings of students, sometimes you're there before the rest of the class. Sometimes there's somebody in class that isn't there before the class wants to move on. Here, core instruction can be delivered, and that student can go ahead and try and mess with the variables and see how the outcomes are different. Here, we're talking about energy inputs, how that energy is being collected, what that energy can be converted into, and then, of course, the energy output. So students can select different inputs, they can select different methods. So the core learning may be understood, but the student has the ability to go deeper. The student has the ability to play with the learning more, which of course we know makes it more sticky. And we also know that that gives different learners at different points in the process more moves to make while core instruction is going on. So this is really exciting stuff. And you can see the applications in world language, where you might have limited participation opportunities in a traditional classroom, and yet being able to access digital interactives in the learning of French, for example, I'm able to do more with my contact time in the classroom. The teacher can orchestrate now, maybe work directly with a group of learners over here, while another group of learners may be working in a more individual way, while another table group might be working collaboratively. Being able to ensure that all of our learners and all of our teachers have access, equitable access to this content, really allows the teacher to focus on the instructional delivery. And in the end, I guess that's where we come back full circle to, is when we think about, it's been clear for some time the what of learning. Standards have given us that. Teachers have spent a long time unpacking those standards and trying to develop activities to rehearse those skills. We're at a point in time where it's clear what the learning should be. The attention is now shifting to how that learning occurs. And from the data that Tim had mentioned to the amount of research and work that Helena had mentioned that went into this project, we're going to really be able to learn some interesting things and share some interesting things in the future about how our learners are interacting with this content, what works better, so that as we iterate it going on, because the release is not the end of the story, it's a living curriculum that we fully intend to iterate, make better, add additional content over time. And that, I will turn it over to the rest of the team and the audience for questions.
Gio, I have a question for you and Helena. How many schools signed up for this? Because I believe this was a sign up, but what percent, and did you get to sign up for the first pass of this year?
So about 70% of our schools have committed to adopting Skyline in at least one content area. Skyline is an optional resource for our schools. We really see this as something that we have to earn teacher trust. We have to earn school leader trust. And so if they're not adopting, it's because we're not doing our jobs well enough, and there's a lot to learn and a lot to improve. So we're very excited though by the initial wave of adoption for this year.
And Helena, and Gio, what are your PD training plan? I mean, this is a massive district with, in the past, no traditional single curriculum. Each school doing doing what they believe was best for their instructional process. How did you facilitate that?
A lot of work, Tim. I think two major problems that I see facing us with implementing Skyline is not just scale, not just hundreds and hundreds of schools across a very large city, but also scope, right? There are pre-K 12 courses across 6 content areas. So we're not just focusing on ELA this year, just focusing on math. So in order to do that, we developed what we call sort of the foundational professional learning series is Skyline 101. And that includes training on the actual systems. We want to make sure that before teachers dive into the content, they're comfortable using Safari, they're comfortable using Checkpoint, they're comfortable using Google Classrooms, all of those platforms and systems that you saw within the CPS technical ecosystem. And then Skyline 101 also includes a year-long professional learning series that is course specific. So teachers are invited to attend quarterly synchronous sessions with peers across the city. And then they're invited to complete asynchronous self-paced unit specific modules with their teacher teams at the school level. That's just sort of the base professional learning. We have additional supports for schools who have raised their hand and said, we need additional support. So we're inviting teachers to attend centralized professional learning communities. And then we have partnered with a small handful of organizations that are working directly in schools. And we're hoping that's just a handful of schools. We have 35 schools doing that this year, but we're hoping to learn a lot and figure out how to scale that and really institutionalize that going forward.
There's another question here. I don't know, Gio or Helena, whichever one wants to use. Technical issues with different devices, my favorite subject of all time. You know, what did you find with iPads, Chromebooks, laptops, and what changes are you doing to address that?
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit. Obviously, our cloud-based world is helping in that regard, right? Because the technical ecosystem should be device agnostic. Of course, if you do this work, you realize we're not 100% there yet. Probably the biggest issue is when the user is having an issue, is it an anomaly or is it a systemic problem? And we can address the systemic problems at scale, but when it comes to individual idiosyncratic user issues, it does become a challenge to think about, does that fall in the training bucket? Is there a larger professional learning? Because I can know how to use the platform, but using it in a live classroom situation where maybe my practices don't align with the utilization of that tool can also create confusions. But we see that the end user devices becomes a smaller issue the further you are going with cloud solutions for the classroom.
Let me add to that too. Yeah, I know, because from a technical standpoint, my favorite subject is iPads and Chromebooks. But yeah, we did design different changes and change different models. So at one point, we felt like we needed to add a presentation view only, not the singular view to the Chromebooks. The iPads are always challenging because in Chicago, you have different versions. So how are the pop-ups going to work and those type of things? But I think overall, we've had great technical success in finding what those issues are and resolving them rather quickly. But yes, the question is very true. There was a lot of issues originally with those integrations and making sure that we learned from what we need to do to move to the next level. Another question, how did you onboard this, Helena? How did you even get this going? I mean, we've got Tim Clark on, who is one of the original visionaries of this project, who should get more credit than I think he does sometimes because he really got it started. But Helena, how did we move it from there?
Just to echo that, I mean, Giovanni and Tim Clark were doing this well before, years before I was doing this. And so they can probably speak to a lot of hard work, a lot of change management, a lot of pushback that happened at the beginning. So I will turn it back to Giovanni to speak to that. The only thing that I can say from my perspective, once the baton was handed to me, is that the roadmap was really set. And I think we just needed to sort of codify that process. So one of the things we really focused on at the beginning when I joined the team was documenting what the production process looked like, right? There was continuous improvement was built into the scopes of the contract, but there's always more details to provide there. And so we spent a long time building out a production process that very clearly articulated the roles and responsibilities of our internal teams, our external partners, and the hundreds of teachers that were involved. But Giovanni, there was a ton of work that happened before I joined.
And there's always a ton of work to be done, no matter what the initiative is. Even if it's an analog curriculum adoption, you get a collection of English teachers together to talk about titles and texts, and those conversations can be as fraught as any other curriculum conversation. That said, when you are asking people to move out of their comfort zone, it's clear that that is going to be a process. What's great is the ability to support that process, because you know what the end point is going to look like, and that sustains you through that change management work. I saw one question here about a learner story that makes this work worth it, and I'd kind of like to pivot to that real quick from a classroom situation where I saw an English teacher who has over 20 years, I would imagine, of experience in the classroom, has created her own content her entire career, has worked very hard to continue to develop and lean into new things. Watching that teacher see the value in the curriculum, and there's a lot to dive into, from the teacher-facing guidance all the way to the student-facing content, perhaps texts that are new to you as a practitioner. And yet that teacher was conducting a small group discussion activity that she had to stop and say, I've never seen this level of engagement before. She admitted that she had designed activities in the past and had never really seen students run with it and have this much agency in their learning. You know, why that's really surprising is when you've been doing it for a while, sometimes you assume you know it all at that point. This teacher was able to look at quality, recognize that quality, and see the engagement with the students. And if you're doing anything digital, one of the first things people will be fearful of is engagement. Is this going to be a bunch of students on screens? Are people just going to be clicking? And what you saw when you went into that classroom, you might not have even recognized the tech in that activity. So it's a balanced curriculum. It has a variety of different learning experiences for the learners. But I think that that's an important takeaway, is all of the learning does not happen on a device, and that student engagement is really possible when teaching with digital resources.
There's one more question, and it's a great one. And it says, how do your vendor partners, how can they improve, better support you? And my feeling is all the vendors, including Safari, have supported you at a very high level. But what are the things that we as partners could do to make it even better for you guys? Helena.
Our partners have been wonderful. I think a key thing that they have done, and we will continue to rely on, is just flexibility, a sense of humor. Things have changed a lot in the past 2 years as we've done this, and the partners that have really been at the table since the beginning and we've built strong relationships with, we have a lot more flexibility with. They're willing to be creative. They're willing to come to the table and really think through problems that we could not have imagined when we were signing the contracts 2 years ago.
One more question. This is a great one because you guys are doing a ton of work here, Gio and Helena. How you measure success, and what metrics are you using?
Well, you can imagine that at the onset, we're thinking about the usual things. Are users able to access the content? What does utilization look like? But what's really interesting about this project is we're going to have a visibility into the classroom that's unprecedented. So on the one hand, we can think of traditional metrics that you would look at around utilization, and certainly that's a starting point. The exciting thing is what we're going to learn, okay? Because if anyone is telling you that they have already a complete understanding of this, it's just not accurate. So it's a very exciting space to be in, because when I think about, did the student access an e-reader? Okay, that tells me something about the student, but were they annotating? Were they highlighting? What was the level of engagement with the object? Now that's something from a digital perspective that can provide insights that we haven't had before. So that's truly exciting stuff. Helena is very much in the moment of coordinating that with diverse groups within our teaching and learning office to name a lot of those metrics right now.
I will say, just to add on that, one of the things that we're thinking about, if the goal of the district is over the next few years, 100% of students are engaging in high quality curriculum, there are two things that sort of come out of that, or two ways to sort of branch that work. One, we have to make sure that it's high quality. So we have to continue to improve it. We will be doing an external evaluation, sort of a product evaluation of Skyline as a curriculum. But the second part of that, which really falls on Giovanni and myself and our team, and then teams around us, is, are they using it? And what are the things that are getting in the way of a teacher actually using Skyline? And that's not just professional development. That is, they don't have a device, or they don't have the right device. That's, they don't have reliable high-speed internet. They don't have the right amount of electrical outlets in their classroom to maintain a cart of fully charged devices. So it's work that is really well beyond our team, but it means that we have to work really, really closely with our partners within central office, and then our partners around the city to solve those problems.
I think that's it, folks. Want to thank you all for joining, and have a nice day, and thanks for joining our session. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having us.
Everyone.